I recently asked former Secretary of Energy Dan Brouillette to give me his thoughts in regard to the importance of baseload energy, particularly as we saw the weather event last month and its impact across the country, particularly in Texas. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit that letter for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. And I just read a couple excerpts from it. First, the Department of Energy's National Energy Technology Lab conducted an exhaustive study following the polar vortex in 2014 and the bomb cyclone of 2018, and found that in each instance, the generation used most reliably to meet the increase in demand due to those weather conditions was produced by nuclear, coal, oil, and natural gas. And quote, these reports illustrate the importance of maintaining generation from sources at risk of closure. One other excerpt, the current market construct of the various grid operators, quote, fails to recognize the value of baseload electricity generation. And that's why these markets should be better, quote, designed to adequately price reliability and resiliency in addition to capacity and the cost of energy. So, quote, power is available to all when it is needed most. Again, that's from the letter from former Secretary Dan Brouillette, which I just introduced into the record. I'd like to thank him for that response and his letter. Mr. Robb, do you agree that baseload coal and nuclear are essential to grid reliability during extreme weather events?
So we don't have authority over resource selection and fuel type. We try to make sure that our work is fuel agnostic. However, diversity of resource has been brought up many times is a great thing for reliability. And I think until there's an alternative, those resources are going to continue to play an important role in the reliability and security of our electric grid.
Yeah.
And how do we incentivize that? How do we make sure that we have that fuel diversity to give us that stability on the grid?
Well, again, I think that's up to local state policy that affects resource selection and or market incentives in market competitive states to ensure that those characteristics are appropriately rewarded. And the technology continues to be developed to provide alternatives and or to make those resources more compatible with the energy vision we have as a country.
What is NERC doing to make sure that the regional transmission operators, RTOs, ensure we retain the baseload generating and the fuel mix, as we're talking about, needed during weather events so that we have the reliability that we need as well as affordability on the grid at all times?
So we do not get involved in market rule determination or some of the questions that you raised there. However, all of the market operators are subject to our reliability standards, which are mandatory and enforceable, that require them to produce contingency plans for all sorts of unanticipated events and be prepared to take appropriate action to preserve reliability of the system.
Mr. Aslami, you referenced the importance of the fuel diversity mix, including baseload for reliability of the grid at all times, and particularly during extreme weather events, correct?
Right, Senator Hoeven, although just with one minor edit, I would say coal is no longer baseload on our system. It has a capacity factor of 36%. So the only traditional baseload resource we have is nuclear, which runs 95% of the time. But I think your point is spot on, which is we do need a diversity of resources.
Mr. Wood, do you agree that generational assets that can provide electricity in all weather events, hot, cold, windy, calm, et cetera, should be fairly compensated for their reliability?
I absolutely do.
Okay. And then how can we better ensure that we maintain that mix and properly incentivize them so that we have them in adequate proportion to the intermittent sources as well?
I think that's the challenge, and that means we've got to specify that firmness and dispatchability is a resource that we're willing to pay for. Different markets can do that in different ways, but at the end of the day, I'm certainly one who sat in the dark for a few days last month. I can vouch for the fact that I want every kilowatt, regardless of how it's generated, to be on the grid on these stress days. And if we aren't paying enough to make that happen, we've got to figure out how to do it.
And if we don't, then we'll repeat what happened last month with that extreme weather event, correct?
We will, and certainly weatherization issues are an important part of making the existing facilities we have. I'm not willing to give up that we don't have a good portfolio. I do think Texas had 100 gigawatts of nameplate capacity, but it didn't show up when we needed it. And so the operational aspects of it are important too, Senator. And I want to make sure that we cover really both.
Right, very much so. Thank you so much for all of you, for your responses. Appreciate it very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.